That's when we get blood splatter on her. All right, I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This meeting is the Goochland County Board of Supervisors Finance and Audit Committee meeting for May 2nd. Yes, it is May already. May 2nd at 12:30. There's some new faces in the audience. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. And since there are some new folks here, I thought I'd just let you know what the purpose of this committee meeting is. It meets quarterly at least, and sometimes with special meetings as well. The purpose of the committee is to review the quarterly financial reports and report back to the board, review the auditor, the selection of the auditor, the annual audit reports, analyze and review any kind of bond offerings or debt restructurings that we might consider, how to fund the capital improvement plan, make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and discuss any other financial issues or topics of interest that might come up. The meetings typically last about an hour. We have a hard stop because there is a Board of Supervisors meeting that immediately follows this in this room. So we'll have a hard stop, so it won't take that long. But let's go to the agenda. And the first item on the agenda today for the committee is to approve the minutes from April 4th, 2023. They've been distributed in advance to the committee. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right, minutes are approved. Thank you very much for that. The next item on the agenda is our fiscal year 2023 third quarter quarterly reprojections. For those of you that may or may not know, we meet quarterly to discuss the financial position of the county versus its budget that was adopted previously. So, for instance, in April last month, we just adopted the FY24 budget, which begins July 1st of this year and ends June 30th of next year. So what we do is we track it as we go to make sure that we're on track. So I'm going to turn this over to Carla Cave, our Director of Finance, to give us an update on the third quarter of the current fiscal year, which ends June 30th of this year. Carla?
Hi, thank you. So as Ken said, this will be a financial projection as of March 31st. We are doing much better than we budgeted for. It seems like we will come over budget, over revenues by over $10 million. That's primarily due to personal property. I think this budget was approved before the dramatic increase in assessed values, so our personal property is going to come in over $5 million higher than we projected. Several other increases we've seen are our interest and also our real estate. Our commercial buildings have been booming much higher than we projected. So between our $10 million overage in revenue and the money we expect departments to return, which right now is looking to be slightly under $2 million, we're looking at a return to the general fund reserves of $8.3 million. That's what we can expect to dump back into our pot at the end of the year.
All right, committee, you've heard the update. Any questions for Ms. Cave? Okay, well, the lights are still on, and so I guess we're still paying our bills, so that's a good thing. Thank you for that update, Ms. Cave. In addition to the quarterly update on the financials versus budget, we, as I mentioned earlier, also discussed topics of interest, and we've discussed topics such as depreciation expense in a tax-exempt environment. Why do you track it? Why do you need it? What is it? We've talked about inflation, where it comes from, what its impact is on the budget, and both on revenues and expenses going forward. So today we picked a little different topic. This is about the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. And the reason this topic came up was based on citizen feedback that I've received, some information that's been circulating out in the market. We've also had a turnover in new staff. Our county administrator has been here a year?
10 months.
10 months, rounding up. And Carla Cave, our Director of Finance, has been here?
11 months.
11 months, all right, so rounding up a little less than 1 year each. We've also got some board members. Mr. Vaders, you've been here
8 months.
8 months, I'm rounding up to a year again. But you get the picture. The picture is there's been a fair amount of turnover both in county staff and on the board. And I'm going to venture to guess there may be some citizens in the audience or listening at home watching this live stream that may have moved into the county since 2002, 22 years ago when the TCSD was formed. So with that and the feedback that I've gotten, I thought it might be a good time to go ahead and take a look back in time, travel back and kind of tell the story of the TCSD, its origins, where it came from, why it's here, what it does, and then going forward, what it might look like. So to do that, I've pulled selected slides from previous public meetings. Right, so this is a collection of slides from previous public meetings. So all of this information has been shared with the public over time, but much of it years ago, and so we are presenting it today just to bring everybody back up to speed. The slides are going to take us back in time 22 years ago to 2002. I don't know if you can remember where you were in 2002. You're not expected to be able to read this. All it says is this is the original Tuckahoe Creek Service Debt Plan dated May of 2002, and that kind of launched the district, created the district. Now, for those that may or may not understand what a service district is, it's a portion of the county, but not the entire county, where inside the district you are able to receive certain benefits that those outside the district don't get. So let's take some examples. Schools, every resident of Goodson has access to the public schools. Whether you send children there or not, you have the ability to send children to the schools. In the TCSD, the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, it provides public water and sewer, but it's only available to those inside the district. And if you live in Goodson outside that district, you do not have the ability to tap into that public service. So it's a public service only within the district and not outside the district. Now, back in 2002, when they set it up, the county borrowed about $62 million and used it to bury the pipes, the trunk lines, build pump stations to pump the water and sewer through the system, and procure water rights. All the water that was purchased comes from Henrico County. We don't have a water treatment plant in Goodson. And also to engage Richmond, the city of Richmond, to process all of our sewer. We don't have a sewage treatment plant. So the idea would be to buy water from Henrico, pump it through the system in the district, and then pump the effluent down to Richmond for treatment. So again, borrowed $62 million, buried the pipes, and entered into those agreements. So that was the establishment of the district. Now, one of the questions that I've gotten is, you borrowed $62 million, was there a bond referendum? Did you actually ask the citizens before you borrowed that kind of money? And the answer is no. And so some of the citizens said, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. You should have done a referendum. But here's the way a bond referendum works, for those that may or may not have gone through the bond referendum process. If you put a referendum before the public on the ballot in November, let's say it passes 51-49, and the county decides to proceed with that referendum, then effectively you've got about 49% that voted against it that are going to get dragged along anyway, all right? And that doesn't seem entirely fair. So what they did was they went beyond a referendum and went to each individual lot owner and said, you make the call yourself for your own individual lot. So some lot owners said, yes, I want in the district, and some said, no, I don't want in the district. When you're in the district, you agree to pay an ad valorem tax that pays back the debt that was incurred to bury the pipes. On the positive side of that, in exchange for that payment, you get the ability to hook up when the time is right. If you choose not to go in the district, you don't pay the ad valorem tax, but you cannot hook up to public water and sewer, and you'll do your usual well and septic and that kind of thing on your own. So citizens, every landowner was given that option. Do you want in or do you want out? So only those that voluntarily said, I want in and I will pay the ad valorem, only those individuals were entered into the district. So no one was dragged along the way a referendum might have done. So they went beyond the referendum to make sure that nobody that did not want to be in the district was forced into the district. No involuntary assessment of the ad valorem tax. So that's the way the district was set up And again, you're not expected to read this, but let's see, is this the right page? No, it's not the right page. Okay, you're not expected to read this either, but the second line down, the date is August 17th of 2002, and that's the date that individuals were due to say, I want in the district or out of the district. So you had a cutoff date, but everyone was given that option to be able to join or not. And because of that, you have an exterior boundary to the district, which is called the Tuckahoe Creek District's boundary. And the boundary is the outer edge of what could be the district. But because inside that boundary, some folks said, I want in, and some said, I want out, you end up with kind of a checkerboard here. So you see the shaded areas of the lot owners inside that boundary that said, I want to be in the district and pay the ad valorem tax. And when you see the white space inside that boundary, those are folks that said, no thanks, I don't want to pay the ad valorem, and I don't want to hook up to public water and sewer. And I'll give you an example of somebody who opted out. Capital One, with their large campus of multiple buildings, opted out because they pre-existed the creation of the district. They paid for their own water and sewer out of their own pocket and had that established before the creation of the district, so why would they need to join the TCSD and pay for everyone else's water and sewer? So they opted out. So that's a big, large white space there. You can see it's actually labeled Cap 1. But there are other landowners as well that said, I don't want to pay the ad valorem tax and I don't want to be able to hook up to public water and sewer. So again, 100% voluntary. And in fact, that was the original landowners. Every land, that transfers with the land. So everyone that's purchased any of those lots since 2002 has, again, voluntarily agreed to either pay that ad valorem and be in the district or not buy the property and not be in the district. So it was 100% voluntary in 2002, and it's been 100% voluntary ever since. And there was no one that was dragged along through a referendum or some other process. All right, so that was the creation of the district. A lot of that shaded area, though, was raw land, and it doesn't pay a lot of taxes, and it certainly couldn't pay back the debt. So what they did was they structured the debt to be able to buy some time to be able to have economic development occur so that you could repay the debt. So what they did was they made heavy use of what's called zero coupon bonds, or capital appreciation bonds in this case, CABs or CABs. The capital appreciation bonds don't pay current interest as you go. What it does is it takes the interest on those bonds and borrows the interest and adds that debt to the principal. So the principal actually grows over time as you accumulate the interest and don't pay it. You're kind of snow plowing the payments forward. That was done to buy some time until there was enough economic development to be able to start to pay back the debt. So the heavy use of CABs or capital appreciation bonds bought some time, but it also meant that the debt outstanding was going to increase every year as they borrowed the interest. So one of the questions I get is, why is the debt today larger than it was originally? It's because the capital appreciation bonds or the zero coupon bonds, where they've been accruing the interest and not paying it. So that worked for most of the first 10 years. They made heavy use of capital appreciation bonds early on to try and buy some time, and then had some current interest payments and principal payments on the back end. Well, during those first 10 years, there was very, very little, if any, economic development that occurred. So what happened was, over those 10 years, you're accreting additional debt, but you're not developing the properties. I guess sometimes citizens, express their thoughts and say, we don't want economic development in Goochland, so don't do it. Well, after about 10 years of very, very little development, but increasing debt service requirements, the district got in severe trouble and was facing some very, very difficult decisions going forward, because the tax revenues that were coming in were wholly inadequate for the way the debt was structured. So what happened was, around that time, the Board of Supervisors in 2011, again, this predates me and most of my colleagues up here, the Board of Supervisors engaged Davenport Company to come in and do an analysis and say, how is the TCSD doing? How is the Tuckahoe Creek Service District debt doing? And how are we going to be able to pay this debt back? So they were brought in to assess the situation, and they took a look at the payments, the zero coupon bonds, the current interest bonds, and the very little growth. And they determined that you'd have to increase that ad valorem tax dramatically to be able to pay the debt back, because of how the structure of the debt and the little bit of development that occurred. So this is what the slide, again, these are actual slides from historical presentations. This is back in 2011. This, the bars, the stacked bars, or the bars indicate the ad valorem tax rate that you'd have to impose to be able to pay the debt back. Now, you can see this rate here at around 32 was the year that this was created, 2011. And what they said was that rate would have to go from 32 cents up to 85 cents. It would almost have to triple to pay the debt back. And that's because, again, the escalating debt service payments that mirrored these ad valorem tax rates. So behind these tax rates was escalating debt service payments that required this increase in the ad valorem tax. Now, if you raise the ad valorem tax to 85 cents, that's on top of the real estate rate of 53 cents. You get about $1.38. And of course, we all know what would happen if the tax rate went to $1.38. Dramatically higher than anybody else in the region. You'd probably see, very, very little economic development going forward, and possibly loss of equity in your houses or businesses. If you triple the taxes anywhere, people will just vote with their feet and move out. So this is what the county was confronted with in 2011. Do we triple the tax rate in the ad valorem? What the county, so Davenport Security says you got a real problem, Goodson. I don't know how you're going to fix it, but you got a real problem. Merit Research at the time, this is back in 2011, who does a lot of analysis on water and sewer systems. Again, you're not expected to be able to read this, but where that arrow is pointing to, Merit Research published what it thought was the worst water and sewer systems in the country. And no surprise, the Tuckahoe Creek Service District was rated by Merit Research in 2011 as the worst water and sewer district in the country. And what you can't read also is who they rated second, the second worst. It was Detroit, Michigan. So we were below Detroit in terms of the quality of our water and sewer district, according to Merit Research. So you're faced with kind of a difficult situation, the pressure to escalate the ad valorem tax dramatically, which would shut down any kind of future development. You'd never be able to grow into the debt. So one of the other things that citizens said at the time was, why don't we just tell the investors you screwed up? You invested in Gooch and you shouldn't have. You lost your money, and just walk away from the debt and not repay it. Well, one of the problems with that is the county had pledged about a dozen levels of collateral for the repayment in the event that they didn't have the cash flow. And I'll just read a couple of the collaterals that were pledged for the repayment of the debt. The TCSD utility revenues, the TCSD physical assets, the county's non-TCSD utility revenues, the county's non-TCSD utility assets, a cash collateral account, a state moral obligation, an ad valorem tax, the real estate tax on the increased value in the TCSD, a county moral obligation, state subsidies for the county's public schools, a surety bond, and early redemption protection or non-call protection. That's some of the collateral that was pledged. So what does that mean? The idea of just walking away and saying, sorry, you guys made a bad investment, we're not paying. As I mentioned, one of the collaterals, this is a kind of a graphic that shows the revenues that are available for debt payment and the debt service payment going to bondholders. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the levels of collateral was a state aid intercept. Now, that's shown here in the lower left. So that state aid intercept could potentially be used to contribute and then eventually pay the debt service. The state aid intercept, basically, the way these bonds were structured, it was a two-stage bond offering with a pair of mirror notes, they call them. So what happened was the VRA, the Virginia Resources Authority, issued bonds into the marketplace in exchange for cash. So investors bought those bonds for cash. So VRA sells bonds, cash comes into VRA. Then on the second stage, Goochland sold bonds to the VRA, Goochland bonds, in exchange for the cash that VRA had taken in, and that's how the cash got down to Goochland County in a two-stage affair. The problem is that if Goodson doesn't pay VRA, which is who they owe, we don't owe the outside investors. If we don't pay the VRA, then VRA has no resources to pay the outside investors. So it's a two-stage thing. So in the event that we don't contribute to the state doesn't want to have a default on their bonds, for the VRA bonds that are outstanding. So they would redirect the state subsidy for our schools. Right now, the state pays about 20%, give or take, of our school budget. And they would redirect that school budget toward the repayment of this debt in the event that we decide to walk away from it and not pay it. So what that means is you can either triple the taxes and pay it back, or you can kind of go dark with your schools. And I don't know, maybe schools can get along with 20% cut in their budget, but if they can, I'd like to hear about it, but I don't think they can. So you end up doing maybe a lot of homeschooling or some other solution. So the walking away, different set of challenges. Raising the taxes to pay it back, different set of challenges. Now, let's say that you're a king for a day and you're sitting up here and you're faced with a choice of either tripling taxes or closing down the schools. I don't know what choice you'd make. But around that time, some concerned citizens came to me and said, you used to make a living doing debt restructurings. We think we're in trouble. Can you kind of help us out and run for office? So run for office when the choices are tripling taxes or closing down the schools. Why would I? They said, but, can you please do it? So I decided to go ahead and take a cut at it and ran for the supervisors and came up here, was sworn in January, and we set to work to try and restructure this and look for a third way, because I wasn't happy with the first two ways. I didn't think we wanted to do either one of those first two things. So this is a slide from the public presentation in 2012. And what we set out to do was restructure the bonds in a way that we could buy some time for the growth to occur, and kind of look for a third way out, or a better way out than the two ways that were being presented so far. So the objectives of that debt restructuring were to stabilize the ad valorem tax at 32 cents and hopefully not have it escalate up to 85, which was critical for economic development and regional competitiveness for new economic development. It was critical for taxpayers in the district to try and stabilize that rate. We wanted to lower the annual debt service and eliminate some of the debt service peaks that were in the original deal, and allow time to grow the tax base and the user base to pay back the debt. And we also wanted to take advantage of a historically low interest rate environment. So those were some of the objectives we set out to try and accomplish through this debt restructuring. To do it, we started with a new team. This is, again, a slide from that same presentation back in 2012. I arrived on the board as a new board member. We engaged a new financial advisor, Public Financial Management, PFM. We engaged a new bond counsel, an outside counsel called Kutak Rock. The VRA had a turnover in leadership as well and had new staff there. And we selected a different underwriter to sell the new bonds, the restructured bonds versus the original ones. So we put together an entirely new team to take a new, fresh look at this and see if we couldn't figure out a way forward. Now, you won't be able to read the writing on this, but you can see the graphic potentially. On the left-hand side is the original debt structure from the original deal. And that gray area, the grayish area on the left, that big, large wedge, that was what they call the non-callable cabs. So these are zero coupon bonds that could not be refinanced, right? And you can see how the debt service payments are escalating dramatically over time, and there's a couple of peaks in there as well. Moving to the right on that same left-hand graph, the light blue was what they call callable or refinanceable capital appreciation bonds. And then the dark blue was the principal for current interest bonds. So these are not zero coupons, they're current interest, they pay as you go. And that yellow is the interest that you're paying on that dark blue until you pay off the dark blue. So it was a fairly complicated structure, but the bottom line is you can see the debt service payments escalating dramatically, which mirrors that Davenport Securities chart of where they thought the ad valorem tax rate would have to go. It would just follow up the debt service payments. Now, the post-restructuring is on the right-hand side. It took us about 11 months to try and figure out a way to accomplish all the objectives. But we were able to do that, and on the right-hand graphic, the red line was the original debt service payment requirements. And shown beneath that, those colored wedges are the new refinanced obligations, debt service obligations. So you'll notice a couple of things. One is we took the light blue and dark blue callables and pushed those out a bit, about 5 years, to buy some time. The second thing you notice is we clipped the peaks, got rid of the peaks. And the third thing you'll notice is the wedges, the maximum debt service payments are around $6 million, not $9 million. So if you follow the ad valorem tax along that same kind of trajectory, you maybe only have to double instead of triple the ad valorem tax, if you're with me on that. Give me a little latitude on that. So, but you'll also notice the colored wedges on the right-hand graph in all cases are below the red line, which means it was what they call immediately accretive, which means every day from the day it was done, it conserved cash and saved the county money every day. So it didn't cost anything to do the refinance. So that's the restructured payment schedule on the right-hand side. The deal itself looks like this. It took 11 months to negotiate this, but we found a way out. And this is the debt restructured, if anybody wants to read through this, if you have trouble sleeping some night. I was going to read it today, but I think I'll spare everyone the go-through. But what that accomplished was all of the objectives, but it also saved money. This shows the first 10 years, the next 13 years, and the last 6 years of the restructured debt. The 2002 original debt service requirements versus the 2012 restructured debt service requirements and the net savings. And you can see in the first 23 years, it conserved $27 million of taxpayer revenue. So that means the burden on the TCSD dropped by about $27 million during the first 23 years. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we extended the callable cabs out a little bit, so your last 6 years, you do pay that 27, but on a net present value savings, because you're shifting payments out way into the future, hopefully buying some time, the net present value savings was about $4 million. And we met all the goals that we set out to. We smoothed out the debt service. We eliminated those peaks. We did that through what they call partial defeasance. We provided short-term relief. It was immediately accretive. It allows time to grow the tax base and the user base to be able to grow into the debt. And it's most importantly, it stabilized the ad valorem tax, which was very important to our customers and taxpayers. And it was critical for future economic development to stabilize that rate. Now, as I mentioned before, it was a two-stage process. We issued bonds through the VRA. So once we in the county had a nice restructuring idea, we had to then go to the VRA to make sure that they would approve it as well. So we had it reviewed by our in-house counsel. We had it reviewed by our bond counsel, Kutak Rock. We took it to VRA. They had it reviewed by their counsel and brought it to the Risk Management Committee and said, this is what we'd like to be able to do to try and relieve some of the pressure and save some money, save $27 million. And we took it and presented it to their committee. And their recommendation from the VRA, they recommended approval based on the fact that it would reduce the risk to all parties. But they said this loan is so unusual in the accelerating debt service payments. It deviates from the VRA's underwriting guidelines. There's inherent risk to a project where you say, build it and they'll come. And the state aid intercept was insufficient to cover the debt repayment. So what they said was, this is nice, but it's still so unusual. I mean, it does reduce risk and it's a good idea, but it's so unusual that we're not going to include it in one of our pools where they pool together loans and bundle them and then issue pool notes. This one was required to stand alone by itself. They didn't want the Goodson to go into that pool because there was still a lot of risk. Look, we did, the restructuring saved a lot of money, reduced the payments, but it didn't create any economic development. So we didn't have any increase to pay those increased and accelerated taxes. So it accomplished a lot of our financial goals, but it didn't necessarily get us out of the woods. So they did approve it, and they blessed it. One of the questions I got was anything we did illegal. It was blessed by at least 3 or 4 different sets of counsel and as being entirely appropriate. But we weren't done yet. So once the Goodson County arrived on at the restructuring, we took it to VRA, got their blessing. The next thing was to take it to the citizens and let them know, because we believe in total transparency. So these are slides from a 2013 community discussion in the town hall meetings. And we took this restructuring out to 5 different town halls all throughout the county. And we showed the county that the ad valorem tax we hoped would remain at 32 for the foreseeable future, even though there's escalations going forward. But this graphic shows that the dark purple line is the restructured debt service payments, and the blue wedge is the original. So it just shows you again the peaks were clipped. The peak debt service was reduced by about 30%. And this shows the actual. The previous was the projected $3 million net present value savings. This in the lower left shows an actual net present value savings of $4.4 million. So it was a little better than we thought when we did the original proposal for restructuring. But we took this out to the citizens in total transparency to explain it to everyone back in 2013 and 14. And then, as I mentioned, restructuring the debt financially didn't get us any additional economic development to share the burden of the debt repayment. So what we did was, after the first restructuring, we wanted to attract economic development, but we didn't have a credit rating. The county was non-rated, or an NR they call it. So we traveled up to New York City to meet with the credit rating agencies, and I went up there and met with each of them for 3 hours and let them ask every question under the sun about Goochland County's finances. And we came away from those meetings with a AAA credit rating from all 3 major rating agencies. That's called the coveted triple. There's less than 1% of the counties about 1% of the counties in the country that have a triple. And of those, no one with a population less than 75,000 has a triple, except Goochland. And we have a population much less than 75,000. I think we're down around 25. So we're the only county our size in the country to get that triple. What that tells you is the rating agencies, after 3 hours of grilling every question under the sun, came away with a deep dive saying, you know what, Goochland County is on very, very solid financial ground, top 1% in the country. So that by that time we had kind of turned things around a bit financially, got the triple. Now potential businesses, individuals, investors looked at Goochland and said, you're not a non-rated on the verge of insolvency. You're AAA across the board, and you have plenty of cash to meet your needs. So now the economic development started to come in big time. But in 2020, if you think back to 2020, this was the pandemic when businesses were closed and restaurants were closed and everything was closed down, and if you went out your front door, you were going to die kind of thing. The board here continued to meet every month like we are now in person throughout the pandemic. And in 2020, during the pandemic, refinanced the bonds again and saved the county millions of dollars again. And what you see here, the blue line is the original debt service. The red line is restructuring number 1, which solved a lot of the problems. Then the wedges is the restructuring number 2. And the big difference you can see is the distance between the red line and the top of the colored wedges from about year 10 through the remaining life of the notes. So that's this area in here. And all that represents millions of dollars of additional debt service savings to the district. So during 2020, we were able to pull that off and save, again, millions of dollars of taxpayer revenue on that as well. So now we've done 2 debt restructurings. Each one saved millions of dollars. We did the 3 credit rating agency AAAs. And now the economic development was really starting to pick up because we're really on solid ground, and now we're really moving. And so when I mentioned earlier on that you had to either triple the ad valorem tax rate or significantly change the way you deliver education, maybe close the schools down, those were the choices. The third way that we saw it was, instead of raising the ad valorem tax rate, increase the economic investment in the district and keep the tax rate at 32 and let economic development double or triple. Now, it's a tall order to try and double or triple the total assessed value of an entire service district, but that was the third way that we saw it. So to do that, you had to get the credit rating, you had to let people know that you're on financial ground, strong financial ground. We did all that, the economic development started to come, and our goal was to double or triple the assessed value of the entire district as opposed to letting the ad valorem tax double or triple. So that was our goal. So how did we do on that goal? Here's the total assessed value of that district since the 2012 debt restructuring and the AAAs that followed. And you can see that we accomplished that. We more than doubled the entire assessed value of the entire district, and that allowed us to keep the 32 cents unchanged for the entire 12-year period I've been on this board, as opposed to only a double or triple. So we managed to accomplish what we set out to do, found a third way, did 2 restructurings, got the credit ratings, carries on solid ground, and the TCSD is now not out of the woods, but it's more than covering enough to be able to pay the debt service on an annual basis, and it's taken all the pressure off of raising that 32 cents. Beyond the TCSD, what else have we been doing? Our real estate tax rate, as you know, at 53 cents is the lowest in the region by far. It's something like 20 or 25% below the rest of the region. That's particularly noteworthy given that we get the lowest subsidy for our schools of any of our neighbors. They have a thing called a local composite index. Ours is 0.8, which means we pay about 80% of our local schools out of our local budget. So out of that 53, we're paying for about 80% of our schools. If you look at Chesterfield, for example, they only pay about 35% of their schools locally. So that means the state's picking up 2/3 of their school, and they still have a tax rate in the 90s. So we're trying to fit 80% in that 53. They only have to fit 30%, 35% into that. And same thing with Hanover, I think is closer to 50 some odd percent, 43%, I guess it is. Statewide average is around 45% is paid locally. So us paying 80 is a much higher number, and yet we're still able to deliver the 53. On the personal property tax, for your next bill that you may have already gotten, you probably see a dramatic reduction there as well. So we're among the lowest in the region on the personal property tax. And you just heard the third quarter update this year. We're on track with a budget surplus so far this year, and we'll knock on wood. Now, what we don't know is we don't know where things are headed in the future. The Federal Reserve likely tomorrow is going to raise interest rates again. We're not sure when that monetary policy works its way through, what that's going to do to the economy and GDP. There may be some expectation of a recession going forward, and assessed values may change, and things may change going forward. But at this point, as we sit here today, we've taken all the pressure off of raising that 32 cents on the ad valorem. We've gotten like as I said, the AAA credit rating, and the county's on firm financial ground, is actually running a small surplus. So with that said, I'm going to conclude my remarks here. And what I'm going to do is open it up to questions from the committee, because this is basically a committee meeting. It's been open to the public, but it's a committee meeting. So committee members, are there any questions about anything we've covered so far? Okay.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Is this on?
Sure.
I wasn't here, and you went over the 2020 restructuring, but it looks like we borrowed in 2012 $56 million, and then in 2020 we took out $61 million. Is that accurate? That's what our audit report says.
I'm sorry, can you just go there again?
Yeah, in 2012 we restructured our debt and took out $56 million, and then in 2020 when we did it again we took out $61 million, a higher amount. Was that to fund a repair?
No, we were limited in our ability to do a comprehensive restructuring based on the callability or the refinanceability of the bonds. And I mentioned the gray area, you couldn't refinance those. Those were kind of chiseled in stone. But they were capital appreciation bonds that were growing in principal each year. And same thing with the longer dated callable or refinanceable capital appreciation bonds, those were growing as well. So what we did each time, since when we did the refinancings 1 and 2, interest rates were dramatically lower than what we were paying. We refinanced basically everything we could to those lower levels. And over time, as some of the additional zero coupon bonds that were growing became callable, we called those out and refinanced those as well. So we refinanced each time as much as we could and took as big advantage of the lower interest rates as we could. And it turns out the second time there was more that we could touch. There was increased principal in what we could touch or refinance. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. That advanced topics didn't make it in here, did it? No. That's okay. That's okay. Any other questions from the committee? By the way, I showed you the original debt restructuring. There was, when the county was non-rated and had to go through the VRA in a two-step process, which they get paid a fee to do that. Once we got the 3 AAAs, we did a restructuring, and February of last year, so a little over a year ago, we issued the first ever general obligation bonds for the county, $50 million, directly into the capital markets without having to go through a two-stage process through the state, because now we have a credit rating, we can go directly ourselves and save that money. Because we have the credit rating and because we've got a AAA across the board, this is the bond document for the one we went directly to the capital markets and didn't have to go through the VRA. So you can just guess the legal and accounting work that we saved by being able to go directly to the financial markets as opposed to doing a two-stage process. This one, by the way, we got an interest rate that was around 1.8%. We did it last year before rates skyrocketed. If we had to do that today, it would probably cost us another $10 million. So we, again, saved another $10 million doing the general obligation bonds a year ago directly in the capital markets.
That was for the elementary school.
To fund the GES, the Goochland Elementary School, and a firehouse. And the reason we didn't do that earlier, 20 years ago, the high school, middle school borrowed some debt to build those schools. It was a 20-year term. We waited until that 20-year term was over and that debt was repaid to reborrow that same amount. So we didn't borrow on top of existing debt and put pressure on the tax rate. Once the high school debt was paid off, and interest rates were 1.8, 1.9. We borrowed the $50 million to build another school and just reborrowed the amounts that we had paid back. Yeah.
And also, Mr. Peterson, a point I'd like to make is as we talk about that general obligation bond issuance, or as we talked about the current position of the county in relation to TCSD, those are two separate entities, and we can't merge resources from one to the other. So as we borrow money for the county general purposes for the elementary school, that's independent and separate of what we've done for TCSD. And the same thing with the county's general fund. As it generates revenue from taxation countywide, we can't take those revenues and apply them just towards TCSD. So I just want to make that point.
That's a good point, and thank you for that. So for instance, if you're outside the district and you're paying Goochland County taxes, but you're not eligible to get the services, we can't take those dollars and then pay for the services that benefit the people inside the district. So the general obligation bonds are all taxpayers pay for the schools because all taxpayers can send children to the schools, but all taxpayers don't pay the district debt because only the people inside the district benefit from that debt. So thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, I think it's also worth noting, Ms. Cave talked about the $10 million surplus of revenues that we saw, and I think it's worth noting, you mentioned it, but I did want to call out, the board decided last month to give $3 million of that back to the citizens in the form of relief, lowering our personal property tax rate from the highest in the region at $3.75 to one of the lowest in the regions.
Yeah, that one of the hallmarks of this leadership team has been to be good fiscal stewards of taxpayer dollars at every turn. And so, yes, we do take a look at all of our tax rates from time to time and make sure that we're not overtaxing citizens and returning money where appropriate. Thank you. Okay. We've got about 15, 20 minutes or so. What I might do, this is a little different and we'll try is I may open up a citizen comment time for individuals out in the audience that may or may not want to come forward and make some comments. It won't be an interactive dialogue, but we always like to hear, we don't want to miss an opportunity to hear from citizens on how we're doing or what we should do differently. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a citizen comment period. Please limit your comments to about 3 minutes. And when you come up, please give us your name and address for the record and for those people at home. So I'll go ahead and open up a citizen comment period.
I'm Steve Levitt. I live at 7036 Ben Hall Circle. I've
See, Mr. Levitt, could you turn on the microphone, please? Thank you.
How about, is that better? Okay, Steve Levitt, 7036 Ben Hall Circle. I have a few comments, about 3 minutes, but I also have a PDF slide to show if it's possible to put this up at some point. On December 16th of 1773, a group of colonists, angry at Britain for imposing taxation without representation, dumped 342 chests of British tea into the Boston Harbor. The incident, which became known as the Boston Tea Party, helped formulate the norms and expectations regarding government and taxes. Fast forward to 229 years, and on July 31st of 2002, the Virginia Resources Authority issued a $62 million plus bond to Goochland County to finance the water and sewer infrastructure of the newly created Tuckahoe Creek Service District. The bond, which was scheduled to mature October 1st, 2027, has been refinanced twice, pushing the maturity date out to October 1st, 2041. With each refinancing, the county has accrued more debt. After 20 years, the current TCSD bond debt has increased 21% to a whopping $76,127,894. According to the Tuckahoe Creek Service District Plan, which you noted, dated May 7th, 2002, the bond will not be guaranteed by Goochland County, although there will be a moral obligation on the county's part to stand behind the bond. There will be no need to hold a referendum on the bond's issuance, since it will not be backed by the full faith and credit of the county. To service this debt, the county implemented a real estate sharing plan and imposed an ad valorem tax. These taxes are being paid only by the residents and the businesses located in the TCSD. The $76 million debt sits squarely on the shoulders of 2,111 residential households and 417 mostly small businesses. County Director of Financial Services, Carla Cave, indicated the county's goal is to pay the bond off early. It's hard to see how this can be accomplished. Over the past 10 years, nothing but interest has been paid. The amount which is being accrued to repay the principal is not on track for 2041. Based on the county's history, the bond will again be refinanced at some point in the future after increasing the burden on the TCSD taxpayers. The same message echoes from the Boston Tea Party. We, the citizens of Goochland County, vehemently oppose taxation without the representation and your management of this escalating debt. Is it time for a change in leadership, or is it a time to throw tea in the Tuckahoe Creek? Now, I've got a chart that I'd like to show which kind of summarizes this stuff.
Perhaps you could just leave that with Lisa, and she can print out the charts and give it to the board so
Well, I
they
think
have it.
I think the citizens would like to see this.
How are we doing on
Is there a way
3
to
minutes?
plug it into the computer? It's a PDF, just one page.
Isn't that arrow to the right?
All right, well, that's neither here nor there. The whole thing boils down to every time you refinance, you're leaving money on the table. You've in addition to your most recent refinance, you owe $14,777,000 more. We're up to $76 million, and you've got 2,111 households who are shouldering this debt. The bond ratings are great, but I am shouldering the debt, and my neighbors are shouldering the debt. You don't live in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. You don't shoulder the debt. Yes, I'm paying $3,500 a year on average for water between my monthly bill and my ad valorem, which we just got. $3,500 a year for water. It's unsustainable. You all don't have a plan to pay it off. Carla said that you're going to hope to pay it off early. I don't see it. You're going to refinance it again. You're going to draw more cash out. The debt is going to get bigger, and you're crushing the people in the TCSD. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you for that. I might ask for one point of clarification. No, thank you for that, I appreciate that. Well, first of all, both the restructurings did lighten the load. Neither one of them increased the load by millions of dollars. But he mentioned the residents are shouldering the debt. I believe it's shouldered by the commercial and the Kinloch residents, but no residents beyond the Kinloch. I think that's the way it's set up. Anyway, but back to your point. Both the restructurings did lighten the load, not increase the load. And had we not done the two restructurings or gotten the credit ratings, Davenport Securities projection had the ad valorem today at 65 cents. So what we've done is been able to maintain the 32 and not have it grow to 65. Do we have anyone else who would like to come up and make a comment?
Hi, I'm Sue Sarasi. I live at 7223 Shenfield Avenue in Parkside Village with them. I am curious as to this, if there are 2,111 residential parcels, we're included in, I'm kind of curious as to what other subdivisions are included in this. Because, as Charlie knows, he's been and talked to us, we're definitely affected, and I brought my ad valorem bill, which is $914.56, on top of, and this is for the first half, on top of my regular first half real estate tax bill of $1,514.74. So the way I'm looking at it, this is $1,800 more a year for water, plus what I'm paying for it. If I ever refied loans like this personally, man, I'd be bankrupt. So I don't understand, how are we AAA rated, which is supposed to be all that in a bag of chips? If this is what's going on, I just don't understand. And who are the 417 commercial parcels? And like Steve said, it's small businesses. We heard at the last meeting where it was a lady who does something with horses or animal things or whatever. And I'm guessing she's part of it, but I really am curious what other subdivisions are help shouldering this tax, because this is a lot of money. And when we're watering our yards, it's that much more. And then if you don't water your yards, then you get in trouble because then your grass isn't green and blah, blah, blah. So what other subdivisions are doing it? Because I don't see it being ever paid off. And to say they went from house to house, that's awesome. But in 2002, I'd lived in Ashland in 2002. That's like a lifetime ago. So we did end up shouldering this burden because apparently Eagle said, oh, yeah, we'll do it. So we got it. I never signed up for this. And to be honest, when we closed on the loan, I don't even think we were told then that we had this tax. I had to ask several people. I'd never even heard the word ad valorem. So anyway, I'm very curious if y'all have an answer. What other subdivisions are helping pay for this, and what are those businesses? Because I don't see this getting paid off. And I'm 62, so I'll be dead before this thing is paid off. So anyway, If anybody can answer, I'd be very open to an answer. Please, thank you.
Yeah. We just got a couple of minutes left. Sure, come on up.
A couple minutes. Manny Alvarez, 2960 Willow Trace Lane in Sandy Hook. I'd like to first clarify, I think you made it pretty clear that this board and the board 4 years ago had nothing to do with the original debt structure or the borrowing. I think the West Creek District was a great idea. I think it was funded badly. And I think if anybody here has kids and have co-signed a loan, in order to get this approved originally by that board in 2002, they had to get Governor Kane to sign it. So he actually was a co-signer of that bond. So it was not structured well for the county back then. Mr. Levitt said that he's got his chart shows $14.7 million in additional cost. If you borrow $62 million, you're never going to pay just $62 million. The cost of the original bonds at 7%, 5%, whatever they were, would have been much higher than the $14 million that we've already paid. So I think it's pretty obvious to me. I think you did a great job explaining it. It's a hard thing to explain. I hope you'll take this video and put it on the Tuckahoe Creek Service District information site. And I hope Mr. Levitt will go back. I think he's too upset to actually listen, because I think you explained it all very well and very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Okay.
Sandra Warwick, 367 Swinburne Road. I've been around since the Tuckahoe Creek Service District was first established. It was a mess at the start, and you and former board members cleaned it up. I recently bought a house in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, fully understanding there would be an ad valorem tax. I don't know what kind of statutory power you have, but too many people are moving into this county without doing any research about what they're moving into. There's lots of information on the website about the tax rates, and people don't look at it until they get the bonus bill. And you do get a separate bill with the ad valorem tax, and people go, what's this? Somehow, developers, builders, and realtors have to be held to account to explain this to people so they can make informed decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Warwick. I think we're running out of time here. Part of this session and this slideshow is to try and help spread information, share information. If you've got residual questions in your mind, feel free to reach out to the county. We can get you whatever answers you need on this. We have undertaken to be a completely, totally transparent government up here and share anything and everything that we do. I will clear up maybe perhaps one other confusion that sometimes comes up is the ad valorem tax is not to get you water and sewer, it's to pay back the debt. And when the debt's gone, then we can revisit that ad valorem tax and see what happens to it. But it's not a water bill for your water. It's a special tax in the district to pay back the debt that was incurred to last time. The second thing is that everybody that, in 2002 when it was set up, everybody that came into the district did so voluntarily. And everybody that's bought a house since 2012 with the debt restructuring voluntarily assumed that requirement to pay that debt, and the 32 cents hasn't changed. So we really haven't changed the rules of the game, if you will, for people that have bought the house since the 2012 debt restructuring. So with that, I'm going to conclude this meeting. Again, show of hands, did anybody here learn anything today? Any new information? Anybody learn something new that they didn't know? Was this kind of a session, a good session to share information? Should we keep doing this kind of a thing and just bringing this out to the folks? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of bobbleheads. So we will continue to do this. We think it's important to share information back and forth and try to eliminate miscommunication and misunderstandings wherever we see them. So thank you all for coming out today. I appreciate it. If you want to go into extra innings at 2 o'clock, is our board meeting up here in the same room. If not, travel home safe. Thank you for coming out today. This meeting is adjourned.